Welcome back to the Black Experience. Man, oh man, I've got an episode for you guys today. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different, guys. A little bit different. Now, when we mention the Black Experience, we mention the various Black and brown people that I've had on this podcast that have spoken of their experiences here at Western, outside of Western, those who came outside of Western, those who didn't go to Western, and the lessons they've learned so that they can inspire the next generation of Black and brown people. But in addition to that, what I have been thinking of is the various intersectionalities that the Black experience has with other people. And specifically today, guys, I have a good friend of mine that I met a few years ago, and we're going to be discussing what the Black experience has meant to him, specifically in terms of our friendship, in terms of the stereotypes he's heard of Black people before meeting me, after meeting me, things that he may have thought of, things he may have not thought of, things he's learned over the past, how we became friends, a little bit about himself, of course, and ultimately any advice for having conversations like this. Today, guys, I'm bringing up someone who I've been known for a few years, since 2021, a brother to me. We have fun. We do impersonations together. He's the greatest Obama impersonator that I know.
One of the greatest.
One of the greatest. And without further ado, guys, let's bring up our good friend, Cole.
That's me.
Cole, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So
I'm really excited for this. I think this is going to be different, and I think this is going to be special.
This is going to be special. So, for those of you that didn't get the memo in the introduction,
I'm white.
Cole's white.
Yeah.
Cole's white, and we actually met 3 years ago and go to the same church, Resonate Church.
Yep.
We actually have another podcast that we do called the CNE podcast that we grow. So
Second greatest podcast.
The second greatest podcast after this one, of course. But man, Cole, first of all, I want to thank you for hopping on the podcast, and it takes courage, it takes some bravery to do this, to hop on this, and this is something I've thought of a little bit, and the reason I wanted you specifically on there was because I think our friendship has really grown, and I think you have a unique story when it comes to having Black friends in the past, whether you've had that or not. But yeah.
I think real quick, you got to give yourself more credit because you are a very easy guy to talk to. You have a comfortable aura around you. Your aura is very green. And I'll just say, this is easy to come here. Of course, I'm comfortable. This is going to be a productive conversation, I feel. Yeah.
I appreciate you, man. Well, let's jump into it, man. Let's do this thing. So, first things first, before we get into these hard-hitting topics and questions that I have, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and kind of how you got to Bellingham, and how the heck did we become friends?
Okay. My name's Cole. In my early 20s, I work a construction gig. I am into God, into reading the Bible. I'm into kickboxing and fitness a lot are my major hobbies. I'm married. I've been married for a little over almost a year and a half now. I moved to Bellingham chasing my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. And she started participating in Resonate Church, and then that brought me to Resonate Church, and that's where we collided. Our orbits, found each other.
Yes.
And that's how we met, and then we got into the same small group with Tim, and I feel like that's where we really got kind of intimate and understanding with one another, and how we really became good friends, and how we were able to develop the CNE show and develop kind of a deeper relationship where we've had more serious conversations than just surface level friendship. And I think that basically sums up your question,
Yeah. And I mean, I still remember the first time I met you, Cole. You had this genuineness about you. You were happy, and you were always like, let's pray. You'd always remind people to pray or whatever. And you'd always be like, right before we eat or something, hey, let's pray, let's hold hands, let's do this, let's pray this, let's thank God. You had that about you that I remember the first few months when I met you. I was like, man, this guy's awesome for that,
There's a Kanye lyric where it goes, somebody say grace so I can say face.
Oh.
And that goes so hard. That has nothing to do with kind of what we're talking about.
Is that what inspired you to?
No, not at all.
To say grace every time?
No. I heard that way later.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
yeah.
Shout out Ye.
Shout out Ye, and not to mention you're a huge Ye fan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, I do like Kanye. Yeah, for better or for worse, I do like his art. I think he's an amazing artist. I also love the person too. But just because he's a person made in the image of God, but also he's quirky. Everyone's quirked up, but he's a little different.
He's definitely a little different. Big different. But yeah, he's awesome. 808s and Heartbreak, still my favorite album.
Oh, for real?
Oh yeah,
dude. That's
Old
awesome.
Kanye is better than new Kanye, personally for me. But
I think they're mirror images of each other. I think Kanye's life is turning out like a book because he started with like soulful R&B music and really transitioned to like really darker rap, and then is transitioning almost back to soulful, like almost gospel music. So I feel like it's like if you open like a mirror, like it's a mirror image of each other, like a book, it's opening up like a book where you have a beginning, a middle, and the end is almost like the beginning.
Right.
So that's what I think.
He's got
with his music, not with his life, with his music.
With his music.
Yeah, with his music.
His life is a whole different thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But music-wise, he's extremely talented.
And talk about, like, even, like, black people who have affected the American culture so much, like Kanye. Everyone was wearing his shoes. Everyone wanted Yeezys.
The Yeezys, man. Well, they came out for, what, $2,000, I think.
It was...
When they first came out.
If you had Yeezys... You were a big deal.
You were a cool kid.
You were cool. You were cool.
Certified cool.
You were really cool if you had Yeezys.
And rich.
Yeah, especially when I was in high school. You were cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, no doubt, as a black man, he's had a major influence on everyone. Asian kids wanted the shoes and listened to his music. White kids wanted the shoes and listened to his music. And so did black kids. It was,
It's big.
It was huge.
Absolutely. Man, let's dive in more into that, into the black culture. So, you come from a small town.
Yeah.
Tell me, was there a lot of black people there? Was there no black people there? Or I guess, when was like the first time maybe you came across black students? Was it in high school, middle school? When was that like?
Really the first kind of more intimate interaction I've ever had with like a black person was my 8th grade basketball coach was black. He was a black man. And that, I mean, for a small town in rural Washington, that's kind of like, you don't see many black people or people of color. No. And he was passionate about basketball. And like, which, I mean, there are white people passionate about it, black people. But like, that was my first time actually meeting, talking to, learning from, mentored by a black person. And that was like a first good interaction. Because I saw how he cared for the kids of color on the team and the white kids on the team.
Right.
There was no discrimination. He cared for both.
Right.
There was, for instance, our point guard, his name was Ashton. He was going up, rolled his ankle really bad, like could not stand back up, and he was in the middle of the key. The coach is a big guy, probably over 300 pounds, big black guy. Storms out on the court, picks him up, and carries him off. And this is like, like a 5'10", 8th grader,
right.
Point guard he just picked up and is carrying off. And then during halftime, he drew the worst part of that about having one of our key players hurt himself and made it into something to inspire us to get back out there and play better and play harder.
Wow.
So, yeah, a little story for us.
Wow.
Man.
And
we did one of those chants where you lock arms and you're in a circle. In the locker room. It was pretty hard.
Sheesh.
So, yeah.
Did you That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
I know,
Are you still in touch with that coach?
No.
No?
No, actually, after that year, I stopped playing basketball because I was bad at it.
Well, I got to ask you, since we're on the topic of basketball already, is it MJ? Is it LeBron? Who's your GOAT?
Who's the GOAT?
It's a tough one.
I think MJ is the GOAT. Yeah, because winning. What did he win? 2 rings.
3 rings.
3 rings. Retired and then came back and won
another 3.
So that to me is just such a different kind of game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another level. MJ is my GOAT as well too.
Yeah.
It's not even. Yeah, it's crazy, but. Man, so that was the first interaction you had in 8th grade. What were your, I guess, like before that? What did life look like before that? Was it obviously, you didn't have a lot of black people, so you couldn't really know much about them. But then obviously you guys had media. There's TV, and there's portrayals and stuff like that. Were there certain portrayals that obviously that you saw maybe on the media or on news or
on the internet
or just movies in general where you're like, if I meet a black person, it might be like this, but then when you met your coach and other black people, you were like, oh, it's actually a different way. They're actually not necessarily what the typical stereotypes of a black man might be.
I know. I will say the internet shows you sometimes the worst image of any people group, if that makes sense. Because, you go on YouTube or you go on World Star and you're watching street fights. It's like 2 young black men fighting on the street. That's kind of the impression that you get. Or you watch, another video and it's some white kid doing pranks to just, people who, don't deserve it or something. So you kind of get different, like you see that dark side of them. Yeah. And I think that was kind of like my first, like maybe that old people kind of suck, I think but also particularly that like maybe like there is a narrative in American culture that says that black people are more prone to violence. Yeah. And there's a lot of different reasons why that has been said. But the black individual is not a violent person. Like that's the honest to God truth. But that was the portrayal that I saw on the internet growing up. Yeah, which is kind of a hard thing to swallow. But yeah.
It's a very hard thing. I mean, even for me and my parents coming from Eritrea, we, they see that portrayal and, they might be like, oh, interesting. Like, to an extent, obviously there's not everyone in a particular group is good. Or not everyone in a particular group is bad, obviously. Yeah. There are some bad apples, obviously. But to then, take those few bad apples and then enhance it in a way where now you're saying, okay, because of these 2, now the whole population is like that. Yeah. That's kind of what I also, the way at least my parents and I sometimes can, see it where we're like, man, like, why is it only that portrayed? Because just good that happens, right? With black people, of course, they do a lot of good things, but sometimes you don't see that in the media, and sometimes your brain might be like, why is that? So, we've also kind of, that's also been a topic of discussion for us too, personally, but it's interesting.
That is.
It's interesting. We need more good in the media. That's kind of the way I see it.
I think so too, yeah. I think just in general, the media... What gets people more riled up? The good in the world or the bad in the world? It's always the bad in the world. It's the bad in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when it comes to the media, whether it's legacy media or on the internet, on X, it's things that will rile you up. That'll keep you on there longer, get you mad, because anger is so much more passionate in the moment than love.
Yeah. And it can be very divisive.
Yeah. And people love divisiveness.
Separate. You're in here, you're in here, group up,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, it's like who you rooting for to get into the Super Bowl. Like, that question in itself is very divisive.
That's already divisive.
For the country.
Heck, the freaking GOAT debate's already divisive enough. Yeah. You got your MJ crew, LeBron, Kobe.
The Kobe, yeah. Yeah, and that's divisive. So people thrive off being divisive.
Yeah.
And, I mean... there is a remedy to that. It's like the selfless love of God and like humbling yourself. Humility is like the enemy to tribalism. Because once you can like humble yourself outside, like to pull yourself outside of tribalism, then you can really see people for who they are, and that's an individual made in the image of God.
You've brought up God several times because you're a Christian, obviously. How has your faith played a role in just when on the topic of
race,
discrimination, of race, of obviously the sad but true history of this country of
oh yeah,
not having civil rights and that fight and slavery and stuff, like how has your faith played a part in you and your identity and your views on that?
Yeah, truly, like I didn't have, now this is hard, but like what reason was there for me to love the black community in the US before I was a Christian? I didn't know black people. I wasn't around black people. I wasn't being exposed to them in any regard. I only listened to their music, and that was it. So there was no reason for like my full heart to love black people. It wasn't there until I actually found Christ and was actually like shown what the love of God is, and then what it means to also give that to others and project that to others. And then now my heart's been changed. I see differently now, where I love the black man, where I love the black community here in the U.S.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's because, again, you said before your faith,
I had no reason to.
Because, first of all, who you surrounded with was white people.
Yeah, and a couple Hispanics, and that was it. Yeah.
And so you didn't know much about it.
Yeah, no, not at all.
And so there wasn't a reason. But it wasn't like I guess what was your heart posture was more just saying, I don't know black people outside of their music and outside of what is portrayed.
Yeah.
So there's no reason for me to love them because there's not even a black person in my town. Is that correct? Is that kind of where you're...
Yeah, I would say so. And I don't mean it like I discriminated against black people.
Right.
No, not at all. It's just like, where is your heart? Like, you don't like consciously make a decision to love people that are different than you if people that are different than you around. You know what I'm saying? I kind of fumble my words a little bit, but if it's hard to choose to love people that are different than you when different people aren't around. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. You're talking about there's no proximity.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Exactly.
No, that definitely makes sense. And if that's how it was.
And if anything's gonna give you a worldview, it's gonna be like Christianity, religion, and the Bible. That's gonna give you like, oh, I'm part of a bigger thing than just myself, than Chimicum, Washington, where I grew up.
Chimicum, Washington.
Yeah.
What a name.
Chimicum Cowboys.
Shout out to them, I guess, right?
I suppose.
Bro, what was the first impressions of meeting me personally? Like, I know, again, we met 3 years ago, but what was that impression like, I guess, and kind of like, how did that friendship even grow? Me being a black person, obviously.
Okay, two things. You were friends with Max. In fact, I think you were being discipled by Max at the time. And I really liked Max. I still do. And I was like, okay, he's friends with Max. He's probably chill, because Max is a really chill guy.
Yes.
And then, like, getting to know you a little bit, I was like, okay, Irmo's cool. He's a cool guy. He's chill. He's not... you're not a rowdy person. You like to have fun, but you're not a rowdy guy, and I think I can respect that.
That's fair.
So that was definitely my first impression of you, for sure. And at that point in my life, too, I was ready to accept church community in its fullest and in its diversity, if that makes sense. So it was really easy to make, and it still is really easy to make, like, friends of color right now in this season of life. Even
though there's not a lot in the church, it's very easy to just seek out those friendships.
Yeah, no, there's not the obstacle there was before. Yeah.
That's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
Man, I think about when I think about conversations like these, I'm like, what are some things that me and the person across might have in common?
Mm-hmm.
And usually, when it's a black person, we actually share a lot of the struggles in common.
Mm-hmm.
With you, I mean, we've even talked about this in the past before. We have two different. Us growing up, we grew up in two different kinds of households.
Yeah.
Different styles, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Discipline-wise, with our parents and different
Mm-hmm.
cultures, language, and all that. Man, when you think about that, Cole, and after 3 years of friendship,
Mm-hmm.
do you think we actually have a lot of things in common? Because we've gotten to know each other,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like we do have some things in common that
Mm-hmm.
we've drawn from each other.
Yeah.
Despite our differences.
Yeah. I think, one, me and you are both humorful people. We love to laugh.
We do.
So,
a lot.
And we love to hang out.
Mm-hmm.
We both have an ambition about us. You have a daily quote board on your wall, which I do respect.
Yeah.
I think me and you are both ambitious. I think we do share a lot of those characteristics.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's why, for example, though we grew up so different, why we're able to have things like the C&E show being produced.
Mm-hmm.
And even this conversation right now.
Mm.
Yeah.
We do have more things in common, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
something that we can harp on and we can go on forever and ever. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, that's the intersectionality. Like, hey, we come from two different backgrounds, but
Yeah.
yet we can find common ground. There can be some
Yeah.
common ground because ultimately we're all human. And yes, what I'm not gonna do is I'm not gonna ignore the facts that obviously being a black person there's things that come differently versus being a white person.
Oh
Obviously.
yeah, very different. Yeah.
But there can be some things that we can draw common ground with,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's the beauty of that.
Mm-hmm.
Cole, to kind of wrap up the conversation, I wanted to ask you, what advice would you have because like I was telling you before the podcast, this
Mm-hmm.
past Monday I was at Seaholm High School for
Mm-hmm.
MLK Day. Shout out MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. Shout out to you and everything you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard two people having a conversation on the stage. Shout out to both of them, Brian and Isabella. And as I was hearing it, obviously, when they were having that conversation, the crowd was mainly white, obviously, right? It was a lot of parents of students at Seaholm, as well as some Western alumni. The BSU president was there. It was amazing. Amazing conversation. It can be a challenge to have these conversations, Cole.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to people who are trying to, let's say a white person who would want to actually have this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but they're uncomfortable, they don't know where to take that next step, that first step of how to initiate this? What would you recommend?
Get a black friend. This conversation would be hard to have with a stranger because it draws on a very hard part of our own humanity, and even our own hard part of our own being Americans, because we have such a bumpy history of race relations in America. So I would say get a black friend. Get someone who you can be close to and real with, and I think start from there, and then once you get their experience, understand their experience, and share yours with them, understand where they come from, and get that real life insight of someone who you're close to, and then continue to have those conversations. Then now you can go and have those conversations with other people because you're more equipped, and you're also more compassionate and understanding because your friend lived this experience, and now you can connect that with others.
Right.
Oh, that's something I wanted to mention too, is because me and you are both such music lovers, is the impact that not even before the time of hip hop, even before the time really of R&B, really the impact of how Black Americans all the way back to colonial times have had an effect on American music, and especially music in the English language has been so huge. Mm-hmm. I was able to take a class in high school that taught about the effect of the transatlantic slave trade on Western music, and how rhythm and how beats changed over time because Black people would carry a lot of their old world music, if that makes sense, to the new world, and that would mix with European music, and that literally created the modern music of the day. Outside of classical music, especially the implementation of drums in Western music.
A lot of West African countries have, I think it's called kizumba. Kizumba is a type of dance. It's an African type of dance, I think from Angola, if I'm not mistaken. But like you said, that's another intersectionality.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And it's stuff like this, Cole, that's not mentioned a lot, that people don't know about a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was watching Nope the other day for the second time. And they had a thing where the first Hollywood motion picture was a black man on a horse. It's like a 2-second clip of a black man on a horse jockey. I think that's like the first motion picture or something like that in the movie. I didn't even know that. You know what I mean? So again, like black influence in this country is a lot. It's just, it sometimes saddens me, when I don't see.
It's almost pushed under, especially in the public school system. It's definitely pushed under. It's definitely not talked about.
Well, because look, when I read the textbook, yes, slavery was a part of history, and yes, we should always remember that history. But
yeah, don't forget your history.
Don't forget the history, but there's not enough celebration, in my opinion. There's not enough celebration of, hey, you know what? There's been a lot of black influence and medical advances in science. George Washington Carver, right, and a lot of influences in engineering, a lot in Hollywood and music,
like in law and civic, and even like civics too, with Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King. There's been so much. You think about the big civil movers in the politic and the civil society here in America. A lot of them are black. A lot of them are black men. Yeah.
So, one heck of a thing. I'm glad you brought that up right before we close. So.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
There you guys have it. That is a treat for you guys.
Stay humble.
Stay tuned. Stay humble.
Stay tuned.
And we'll catch y'all on the very next episode. Peace. What is up, y'all? Thank you so much for tuning in to that episode. Make sure to click the subscribe, follow button, as well as the bell to get notified on all my new content that is coming out every Wednesday and every other day. And make sure to click that link in the description down below to get access to all my socials and any other platforms that I have my podcast on. And until next time, y'all, peace.